Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 7 of the Geoguessr Reddit League. My name is Zotomo, and I'm joined this week, as always, by Calamity.
Hello.
And our special guest this week is IceTharu from Division 2. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, thank you. I'm doing pretty well. Thanks a lot for having me on.
No problem. We're glad to have you. And a very exciting week as most of the divisions have moved over the hump into the second part, and Division 4 is finishing up and getting ready for their playoff run. So yeah, without further ado, let us jump right in to Division 1, Week 7 in Lesotho. I practiced my pronunciation to get it correctly for this. So let's take a look at those scores. Yeah, so Calamity, probably the biggest thing here, Wurdock pulling out a win.
Yeah, I'm not that surprised by it because we've seen GC not practicing too much on a couple of the national maps before. For example, I remember him doing very badly on Kyrgyzstan as well. But yeah, it's been overall a surprisingly weak showing from Division 1 this week. An average of only 15,157 points makes it their lowest scoring week by over 2,000 points behind Brazil and Kyrgyzstan. And interestingly, no other division had their lowest score in Lesotho. Division 3 even came close to beating the highest national average from North Macedonia, falling short by not even 300 points. But it wasn't just one or two scores bringing the average down either. With the exception of Schludi, Simi, and Raidman Mucha, no one even got above 16k. And the seed wasn't even that difficult. Out of the 7 players I didn't mention, only 3 of them got close to the round in Pitseng, where 500 meters north of the starting point, there was a sign saying the town name on it. And if you go south, you went into the city, so that should have been easy as well. Funnily enough, IceTharu and me were both exactly 15 meters away from the right location in 1.5 minutes. So it wasn't such a difficult round, and only Magyaron got close to the round near Maliba Lodge, which was a repeat from the Division 2 seed. Yeah, so I'm just really confused about how that could go so badly. But talking about the actual matchups, yeah, not a lot of surprises this week. You mentioned Verdok beating GC. And yeah, Schludi's lack of winning with relatively average scores early on in the season turns around now and sees him lose to Simi despite a pretty good score.
Yeah, indeed. But Raidman Mucha does keep his first place, I think, with that win over Comte Bilu in last. But yeah, Ice, anything from you here in Division 1?
Yeah, I was quite surprised with Equinox's win over Chicago since he was picked to the first spot in last season's Division 2 by Chicago, and he also lost against Chicago in Bangladesh. So I did expect Chicago to actually win that matchup. But yeah, other stuff went by the book, and Schludi got a bonus point despite, he finished third in the total score, but he got a bonus point, so he'll be happy with at least that.
Yeah. So despite the low scores, pretty much the matchups go as expected, but we probably would have all expected them to have higher scores. So very interesting. Let's take a look then at the table as we get into this. So a little bit of a shakeup in this table with that win over GC. Verdox does climb up a few places. He's still in that relegation fight, but he's out of the automatic relegation battle. And Schludi moves down quite a few places down to 6th, with Equinox moving up a bit from there. But yeah, besides that, Calamity, anything from you on this Division 1 table?
Yeah, we're 2 weeks before the end of the season now, and everyone except Kompilu can still make the playoffs. Technically, also Raidman Mucha and Simi are now the first 2 who have secured themselves from relegation. That being said, I don't think either of them were really thinking about that to begin with. But yeah, it's still really close, especially if you look from 3rd to 6th place. But even then, Schludi has been in a pretty bad form, so to speak. He's only picked up 1 point, I think I wrote that down. He's picked up 3 points in the last 4 weeks, so he needs to be careful as well. Otherwise, he'll be in danger of dropping down into the relegation zone.
Yeah, Ice?
Yeah, it's starting to look very tough, especially for Comte Bilu to get out of the direct relegation zone even. But otherwise, it's kind of looking as expected before the seasons with Raidman and Simi on top. Although I felt Raidman has been doing very well this season since he got into the relegation playoff last season. So I'm very impressed by his consistency this season.
Yes, some of the newcomers in Division 1, Comte Blue, Schulde, and Kevin Kroner, all now in the bottom half of the table with Schulde's bad run of form. But Verdok has been picking up a few points here and there to move himself a little bit up. But yeah, definitely second place finisher Simi from last season will be looking now that Topotic is not in the division to maybe take that win against a Raidman there. So let's see who they'll be facing off next week in Sweden, which is our map for week 8. So Calamity.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to predict these matchups this week because I don't really have a good grasp on how Sweden will play out for those guys. And it's the first week where I haven't played the seeds myself yet by the time we're recording this. And I don't think any of the maps we've played so far in this season are particularly similar to Sweden either. That being said, the match that will probably have the most importance in regards to how the table will end up is Magyarn against GC. And yeah, Schludy, I've mentioned it before in the table, he'll definitely need to pick up at least some points with a draw against Chicago. Otherwise, it'll drag him into that relegation fight, which he probably doesn't want.
Yeah, Ice, any interesting matchups for you here?
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Reitman Mucha can do against a Swede, because I expect Kevin Kroner to do a lot better this week than any of his other weeks. And yeah, that will also, since I expect him to do well, that will put pressure on Chicago to also deliver.
Yeah, I think definitely an interesting matchup. I think this might be the only time in any week where we have, I guess Pennsylvania had lots of Americans, but a national map with the player from that nation. We had a state in America, which is a little bit different than a national map.
We technically had Ed in Brazil.
Yeah, I guess Ed has lived so many different places. I guess we could give him some home ground status for a few countries, but yeah, we could give him Brazil as well, I guess. But yeah, I think for me, seeing how Europeans will face off against two Americans in Schulde and Comte Bilou against Chicago and Equinox. They're not from the Sweden, obviously, but being a European, they might have a slight advantage over the Americans, depending on how those two players play. I know Chicago plays a lot of North American maps mostly, so we'll see how he can perform in Europe on a country-specific map, at least. Yeah. Definitely shaping up for very interesting things to come. But, okay, well then let's move on to Division 2 and these matchups. And Ice, this is your division, so I'll give you first shot at your thoughts on this. But probably the matchup has to be Mr. Blue versus Tall Impala, number 1 and number 2, living up to expectations.
Yeah, they both they were number 1 and 2 before or at this point, and they both put up the best scores, almost perfect score from Mr. Blue and Tall Impala not far after. The other scores were much more scattered around from 8,000 to 20,000, but yeah, that was definitely the biggest matchup. Otherwise, I was impressed with Seppo's win. That was a good win for him, and also, Radox got a very important win for himself for his fight against relegation.
Indeed. Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I do occasionally check the map page to see who's practicing, and well, practice has paid off, I'd say. Not necessarily for Tall Impala, who had the bad luck of facing Mr. Blue this week, but yeah, I've seen you, IceTharu, practice quite a bit, and I've also seen Seppo with a few practice games in there, and that ended up being 2 wins. Radox, as you said, follows with a very close win against Scamry, and Radu gets a bit lucky with his 3 points.
Yeah, just edging out Blockchain there, but definitely not a result for Slava Goli that he would be hoping for, under 9,000 points there by him. And as we take a look at the table for Division 2, the newcomer promoted from Division 3 is definitely not having himself a good time, sitting at the bottom of the table now, with Radox finally getting his second win, climbing out of that last 12th place. And Tesco Tech, continuing his slide down after his yellow card. He's been finding it very difficult to pick up any points at all. But yeah, IceTharu and Paul slightly moving up the tables a bit with that drop. But yeah, Paul pretty much is unlucky having put up a very good score, but not doing a whole lot for him having faced off against Mr. Blue. So yeah, Ice, anything important that you notice here in the table?
Yeah, I do notice that Seppo got out of the relegation spots for the first time this season, so he'll definitely be very happy about that. Otherwise, Mr. Blue extended his lead at the top, and he's now looking very, very strong for automatic promotion. And RC also got into the promotion places despite a low-scoring game, which, he can definitely build on as well. Also, I like the table is so split down the middle. There are 6 players with double digits in points, 6 with single digits, and the ones in the bottom half all have a negative score differential compared to the top half. So it's looking pretty split at the moment.
Looking like a proper table, isn't that right,
Yes,
Calamity?
Definitely. How I like it. There's been a lot of movement in the table this week as well. Scamry actually being the only one who didn't move his position this week. But Scamry as well as Benica have been on a very bad stretch of form. Both of them picked up 6 points in their first 3 games, but look at where they've ended up now. Benica this week picking up his first points since then. And Scamry's only picked up 1 win. I think that was 4 weeks ago since then. And even worse for both of them, they've still got their games against Radu and Tall Impala in front of them. And yeah, with Seppo and Radox, who are starting to pick up form, relegation is looming over them. And Teskotak being without points for the last 3 weeks as well, it's looking very close to, in a division with 4 Americans, having none of them being the top half of the table.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Some players starting to come alive in the second half of the league, and some players seeming to be slipping a bit after the grueling week-by-week competition that this league presents us with. So let's look at who they'll be facing off in Sweden. Ice, any interesting matchups for you? Maybe a bit interesting for you against Yellow Skarmory, 6th and 7th place.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. I'm actually 5th place now, though. So, but yeah, that's going to be a good matchup. I expect him to do better on Sweden, since it's not a map you can practice as much as Lesuru and some of the others we've been playing. And yeah, I don't know if I expect the Europeans to do better, especially at Sweden, since none of us is at home court. But there's a lot of matchups between the top half and the bottom half, with I think the only one happening within the bottom half only is Blockchain versus Slovak Goalie, which will be very important for how that plays up, the relegation battle in the future. And then Mr. Blue has to play Teskodak from the top half. So yeah, Teskodak faces a tough ask to get his first point since I think week 4.
I see. Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, as I said, Blockchain versus Slovak Goalie is probably the game with the most importance, or at least the game where it's least clear who's going to win, in my opinion. Apart from that, I feel like we've got a lot of clear favorites going up against underdogs. And if I had to bet on one upset to happen, I'd probably put my money on Seppo. Maybe less so because of Seppo. I know he can put up good scores, but more so because I've seen Radu having a couple of weaknesses throughout the league so far. If he's having a good week and he's putting up a good score, he can definitely win. But if he's having an off week, might be something in it for Seppo.
Yeah. I think Radox taking on Giovanni there might be a little bit of a stretch for him. He's getting some momentum, but that might be a little bit of a too high of a mountain to climb. And we know Tom Paul is going to put in the practice every week on those country maps. So not really going to give much chance to Benica, who might be looking for maybe a bit of luck, but against a player who's going to practice, not likely. So yeah, probably Seppo, the most likely chance to pick up some points there, if not just in bonus points. So let's take a look at the fixture, the results from Division 3 in Lesotho. Calamity, Geoguessr at the top, getting a bye week, but other than that, pretty standard across the board.
I wouldn't really say so, But yeah, as I've mentioned before, when talking about Division 1, Division 3 put in a very good game this week. No really that not really any that bad scores is what I wanted to say. The Basement obviously stands out, being so close to being the first one this season to pick up an extra point for a perfect score. I assume he just ran out of time before being able to pinpoint it correctly, because it wasn't the hardest pinpoint to make, and he did take all of his 4 minutes to do so. Freckles, having the misfortune of going up against him, nets him his 4th point for a loss this season. So yeah, he'll certainly be glad about that rule change. And yeah, we've also had Hugo Alvara and Wolf Tracker slip up this week in their games against Wakelock and Fios.
Yeah, I said pretty standard across the board, and then I remembered the very top thing that I hadn't quite looked at was the nice upset by Theos over second place Wolf Tracker. Yeah. So Ice, anything from you stand out?
Yeah, like Calamity's big win over Pork Steaks is going to move him much closer to Wilo Wizard in score differential, which might actually matter at the end of the season. But also, yeah, I was very, very impressed with the Basement's 4 or 5Ks in Lesuru. I didn't even think that was possible in 4 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, very impressive score by my partner in the co-op league. So hopefully he can transfer that good run of form over into our a matchup there. But let's take a look at the Division 3 table, just over the hump halfway through the season. Bug, of course, had 2 red cards, so he has been disqualified. So the table looks a little bit funky with some of these players going to get bye weeks in the coming weeks. Theos with the upset, and Wakelock move things around a bit of shuffling. Calamity, you do go up to 3rd place. Nice for you. But with those wins, Theos still sees himself in the relegation battle, unfortunately. So, yeah, Calamity, anything else?
Yeah, with Guelo Wizard having his bye week, I finally got the highest total score of the division back. And as you said, I've made it back into the top 4 as well after that horror show of week 5. But with a lot of games still to be played, the division is wide open, and with the exception of MD Spaceman and maybe Pork Steaks, everyone still has realistic chances to get promoted. I'll speak a bit more about this when we talk about the predictions of next week, but the next week could be very, very crucial in how this table develops, because there's a lot of, I'd call it infights between the top players and the bottom players, and depending on how those go, it could still change drastically in the following weeks.
Ice.
Yeah. It is looking very, very hard for Empty Space to get out of there, but can't do it. Otherwise, I don't think a lot changed really in this division over the week. The top 5 stayed the same. Calamity moved into the playoff positions. And MD Basement, did he move up? I think so.
I think he did, yeah.
So they moved around in their respective halves, so to speak. Like the top player shuffled a bit and the bottom shuffled a bit, but no one really made any big movements here.
Yeah, and I guess Theos used his almost home advantage to get out of the relegation spots, which he'll be happy about.
Yeah, it does move himself out of the automatic relegation spots, indeed. Still no draws in this division, which is interesting. So those zeros straight down the middle, something to watch out for next week in Sweden. As we take a look at those matchups, MD Spaceman will not be moving anywhere with his bye week. But beyond that, Calamity, anything that might prove interesting for our fans to watch out for?
Yeah, there's some very exciting matches to look forward to this week. The Baseman versus Wolf Tracker, Hugo Alvaro versus Freckles. Those are both just as important for the table as Guelo Wizard against Wakelock. And this is just the start of a very intense finish to the season. The Baseman and Freckles still have to play 2 of the top 6, and Wolf Tracker, Hugo Alvaro, Guelo Wizard, and me have to play 3 of them in the last 4 weeks. But not only the top of the division is exciting, Redirect and Pork Steaks game will also be will be of high importance for their hopes of staying in the division.
Yeah, Ice, anything you're looking forward to this week?
I am looking forward to the match between the Baseman and Wolf Tracker. I think Sweden is a country which it's good for experienced players to play it. compared to Lesotho and stuff like that. So Fracas and Wolfturker, I'd expect them to put up high scores there. And also I'm looking forward to see if either Redirect or Porksticks can get out of the relegation spots.
Yeah, and Calamity be hoping that Theos does not pull off another upset this week.
Yep.
So he can continue to climb those tables and maybe even get into second place. Nice. Well, let's take a look at for a very vital week, as this was the last week before we head off into the playoffs with a bye week, a break for everybody next week. So we'll take a look at Division 4A first. Ice, probably the most interesting thing is my loss to Neusel.
Yeah, Neusel put up a really good score to beat you, so you can't really feel too bad about that. You put up an okay-ish score, but unlucky to move out of the playoff spots. That's probably going to hurt a little bit. Otherwise, Max FI got a good score again, and he's looking very strong. Otherwise, yeah, Patriots locked up the league. I think he had already done that before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, Mabos and Max changed up the seeding into the playoffs a bit, but I'm not sure either of them will really care about that at the moment. And yeah, Zotomo, 4,800 points more is what you would have needed. How does it feel to scrape past the playoffs by so little?
It was pretty rough. Like I went back and looked at my matchups because I had a feeling that I was a bit unlucky. And in my research, I played two people who had their best game against me. And then I played two people who had their second best week against me. So 4 matchups that pretty much over half the season had just really been quite unlucky for me. Neusel put up his second score total, but the best since week 1. So he had pretty much had a very strong performance in the first week, really had kind of not shown up all the way through the whole season, and in the last week decides to practice, I guess. I don't know, but hats off to you. That's a very good score in Lesotho. And yeah, my own game started off very well, and then it just kind of fell apart in the end. And by the end of the match, I was like, yeah, I'm probably done. So I was kind of resigned on my fate before I even saw any scores. But yeah, it was a very interesting country to play besides that. So a bit unfortunate. We'll go more in depth into the playoffs next week as Division 4 has a bye week, so it'll give us a lot more time to talk about it. But here, let's just take a quick look at how those tables finished for Division 4A. Patriots with that automatic promotion slot does get him into Division 3 next season. Max FI, Mabos, Neusel, and Nitnarok respectively move into the playoffs against 2nd through 5th in Division 4B. So let's take a look at how Division 4B shook out for their final week. Calamity.
Yeah, H-Town with a heroic effort picks up a draw against Ed, pushing him away from the direct promotion place with no benefit to himself. He'd have finished 5th with a loss as well, but it's a nice way to get a bit of self-esteem, knowing that on a good day he can compete with the best in the division, which should give him a bit of hope going into the playoffs. And as predicted, GRH77 versus that one weird girl did decide the last remaining spot in the playoffs, and that goes to GRH77 with a good score.
Ice.
Yeah, I think Close managed to put up a score which rendered Ed's and H-Down's match meaningless for the top spot, because Ed would have had to get 25,000 points to equal Close, or no, to beat him on points, and otherwise it went as expected. Deep Thought is looking strong for the playoffs, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let me check something. I think that was actually quite important because
it was before the leg. Closed was on 16 points and Ed was on 16 as well, so they went into it with the same amount of. Actually, no. Ed was on 17, so Ed had 1 point advantage over Closed. So if Ed had 1, he would have gone up directly.
Yeah, so that pip by H-Town there, basically, only thing it really did was cost Ed the automatic promotion spot. It's a little bit frustrating, but he can take that away from this week at least. He taking away number 1 from Ed. So maybe something to be proud of in your division playoff. But yeah, it's actually quite an important matchup for that. So let's take a look at the Division 4B table, how that finished off. Yeah, with that loss, closed 24/7 does take that automatic promotion spot. Ed, Deep Thought, GRH, and H-Town all moving offs next time against those players from Division 4A. Did I actually... There we go. I did just take a quick look at who they'll be facing off against in 2 weeks on a world map. We'll go more into depth into this in next week, but just to show you kind of what the quarterfinal playoffs look like. H-Town is up against Max FI, Noisel against Deep Thought, Mabos against GRH77, and Ed against Nitnerok. So typical playoff position. Second place facing off against fifth. Third against fourth from the opposite groups. So yeah, we'll talk more about that next week. So we'll see you all then. But the map we'll be seeing, we've mentioned it as always, is Sweden. And I actually didn't make a map screen for this because I was busy with other things as always. So what do you think about Sweden as a country map in a little bit more detail, Calamity?
Yeah, I've mentioned before that I don't really think there's any map so far we've played in this season that is similar to Sweden, but in last season we played Estonia, and kind of from my practice games it just feels to me like Sweden is just Estonia but bigger, which takes one of the parts that makes Estonia fun to play, being relatively small, away, and makes it more annoying. You can get a pretty easy seed in Sweden if you get lucky, but at the same time, if you get unlucky, it isn't entirely unrealistic to go 3 or 4 minutes without seeing a single sign that's helpful to you. And yeah, there's not a lot of information you usually get. I haven't really looked at area codes or anything of the like, so I can't say whether they're relevant. Most of the information you're probably going to find are town names that are some margin of kilometers away from you, which you may or may not be able to find on a map. I've also I think it was Deep Thought actually, who's a bit unlucky that the week he's going to skip is his home country. Yeah, I think he made a map a couple of months ago of the different sort of bus stop signs in the different parts of Sweden, which if anyone really wants to torture themselves with learning that, you can. You can probably find it on Reddit. But yeah, going to be an interesting week.
Yeah, if you Ice on Sweden as a map.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not going to be a map where the landscape is telling, like in Lesotho or Kyrgyzstan, since it's basically a huge forest. We'll get to work with street signs and street names and town names again, which is going to be, I guess, more of a classical GeoGuessr game. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a fun and pretty nice it's not going to be as practice intensive as the previous maps we've been playing.
Interesting. Yeah, the map does have over 20,000 hand-picked locations, so you won't be getting, hopefully, too many repeats. And it has a very easy designation with an average score of 21,000. So very interesting. And Kevin Kroner does currently hold the highest place on the map with a perfect score of 25. Simi also has gotten a perfect score on this map in the past. So this might be the first week we get a bonus point for a perfect score, Calamity.
Yeah, it could be. It'll depend a lot on the seed, though.
Indeed, yeah. So, that will do it for us this week. We will see you all in Sweden next time. Look forward to that playoff coverage starting in 2 weeks from Division 4. Without that, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.